The train's whistle screamed, a sharp cry that sliced through the dusk like a blade. Eleanor Grayson, 85 years old, sat on the cold metal bench, her gnarled hands clutching a suitcase handle as if it were her last tether to the world. Around her, Union Station buzzed with travelers, their hurried footsteps and chatter a cruel reminder of her solitude. Eleanor's eyes, clouded with age but sharp with memory, scanned the platform. She had been waiting for 3 hours, her thin frame shivering in the autumn chill. Her son, Robert, had promised to pick her up. "I'll be there, Ma," he'd said over the phone, his voice clipped, distracted. But the platform was emptying now, and no familiar face emerged from the crowd. Her heart, heavy with a lifetime of quiet losses, sank deeper. She was alone. The station's neon lights flickered, casting long shadows over her faded blue coat. Once, that coat had been vibrant, bought by her late husband, Thomas, for their first trip together to Chicago decades ago. Now, it hung loosely on her frail shoulders, a relic of love long gone. Thomas had passed 10 years prior, and since then, Eleanor had clung to routine: her garden, her morning tea, her weekly calls with Robert. But 6 months ago, Robert had moved her from her small Indiana home to a cramped apartment near his family in Cleveland. "It's for your own good, Ma," he'd said, his eyes avoiding hers. She hadn't argued. She never did. Tonight, though, was different. Robert had driven her to the station in Cleveland, handed her a ticket, and told her to wait for him in Chicago. "Work's crazy," he'd muttered, kissing her forehead before speeding off. She'd trusted him, as she always had. But as the hours ticked by, a gnawing fear grew. Had he forgotten her? Or worse, had he meant to leave her here? The crowd thinned to a trickle. A janitor swept nearby, his broom scraping the concrete. Eleanor's hands trembled, not just from the cold. She opened her suitcase, fishing out a crumpled photo of Thomas, his smile warm even in the faded Polaroid. "What do I do now, Tommy?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the station. A young woman, maybe 30, approached the bench. Her name was Lila Carter, though Eleanor wouldn't learn that until later. Lila wore a bright red scarf and carried a leather satchel, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She'd been rushing to catch her train home when she noticed Eleanor, alone, her face etched with quiet despair. Something in Lila's chest tightened. She slowed, then stopped. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Lila asked, crouching slightly to meet Eleanor's gaze. Eleanor blinked, startled. "I'm waiting for my son," she said, her voice fragile but polite. "He's supposed to be here." Lila frowned, glancing at the nearly deserted platform. "How long have you been waiting?" "Since 4. Eleanor replied, her eyes dropping to her lap. It was nearly 7 now. Lila hesitated. Her train was leaving in 10 minutes, and she'd already missed one earlier that day. But the sight of Eleanor Small, shivering, clutching that suitcase stirred something deep within her. Her own grandmother had passed a year ago, and the memory of her warm hugs still lingered. Lila couldn't walk away. "Mind if I sit with you?" Lila asked, settling onto the bench without waiting for an answer. "I'm Lila. What's your name?" "Eleanor," she said softly, her lips twitching into a faint smile. "Eleanor Grayson." They talked, at first haltingly. Eleanor spoke of her garden back in Indiana, how she'd coax roses to bloom even in poor soil. Lila shared that she was a freelance photographer, always chasing the next story. The conversation was a small warmth in the cold station, but Eleanor's eyes kept darting to the platform, searching for Robert. Lila checked her phone. Her train was gone. She sighed but stayed. "Let's call your son," she suggested gently. Eleanor's face clouded. "I don't have a phone anymore. Robert said I didn't need one." Lila's jaw tightened, but she kept her tone soft. "That's okay. I've got one. What's his number?" Eleanor recited it, her voice trembling. Lila dialed, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. A knot formed in her stomach. "Maybe he's delayed," she said, forcing a smile. "Why don't we get you somewhere warm? There's a cafe across the street." Eleanor hesitated, her pride warring with her exhaustion. But Lila's kind eyes won her over. They crossed the street, Lila carrying the suitcase, Eleanor leaning on her arm. The cafe was cozy, its lights glowing gold against the darkening evening. Lila ordered tea for Eleanor and coffee for herself, and they sat by the window, watching the station across the road. As they sipped, Eleanor's story spilled out. She spoke of Thomas, their life together, the way he'd hum old jazz tunes while cooking breakfast. She spoke of Robert, how he'd been a sweet boy but had grown distant, consumed by his job and his own family. "I don't want to be a burden," she said, her voice breaking. "But I don't know where to go." Lila listened, her heart aching. She thought of her own grandmother, how she'd always felt safe in her presence. She couldn't leave Eleanor like this. "You're not a burden," Lila said firmly. "And you're not alone tonight." The cafe's clock ticked past 8. Lila tried Robert's number again. Voicemail. She left a message, her tone polite but edged with urgency. "Hi, Robert, this is Lila Carter. I'm with your mother, Eleanor, at the cafe across from Union Station. She's been waiting for you. Please call me back." As they waited, a man entered the cafe, his coat dusted with rain. He was in his 50s, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He glanced at Eleanor and Lila, then approached. "You ladies okay?" he asked, his voice low but warm. "I saw you at the station earlier. Looked like you could use a friend." Lila smiled, surprised by his concern. "We're managing," she said. "Just waiting for someone." The man nodded, introducing himself as Henry, a retired firefighter who often hung around the station to help travelers. "Seen a lot of folks get lost here," he said, pulling up a chair. "Not just physically, you know." Eleanor's eyes softened. Henry's presence, like Lila's, felt like a small gift. They talked, the three of them, sharing stories of the city, of lives lived and lost. Henry spoke of his late wife, how he'd learned to find purpose after her passing by helping others. Eleanor listened, her heart stirred by his quiet strength. But as the night deepened, Robert still didn't call. Lila's unease grew. She stepped outside to try his number again, leaving Eleanor with Henry. The line rang this time, and Robert answered, his voice sharp. "Who is this?" "Lila Carter," she said, keeping her tone even. "I'm with your mother. She's been waiting at Union Station for hours." A long pause. Then, "I got tied up at work," Robert stammered. "I'll be there soon." Lila's grip on the phone tightened. "She's 85, Robert. She's alone and scared. Get here now." She hung up, her heart pounding. Back inside, she found Eleanor laughing softly at something Henry had said, her face brighter than it had been all evening. Lila smiled, but her mind raced. Something wasn't right about Robert's response. The cafe's warmth couldn't fully chase the chill in Eleanor's bones, but the company of Lila and Henry made the night feel less cruel. She sipped her tea, her hands steadier now, and listened as Henry recounted a story about rescuing a stranded family during a snowstorm years ago. His voice, gravelly but kind, reminded her of Thomas's, and for a moment, she could almost hear her husband's laughter. Lila, however, was distracted. She kept glancing at her phone, willing it to ring. Robert's curt response had left a sour taste. She'd heard the hesitation in his voice, the way it wavered when he said he'd be there soon. She didn't trust it, but she didn't want to alarm Eleanor, so she smiled and joined the conversation, asking Henry about his firefighting days. As the clock neared 9, the cafe door swung open, and a young man in a wrinkled suit stumbled in, his face flushed. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Eleanor. "Ma," he called, striding over. Eleanor's face lit up, relief washing over her. "Robert," she said, her voice trembling with hope. But Lila's eyes narrowed. The man wasn't Robert. He introduced himself as Jamie, a volunteer with a local homeless outreach program. He'd been at the station earlier, handing out blankets, and had overheard Lila's call to Robert. "I recognized your name, ma'am," he said to Eleanor, his voice gentle. "I saw you sitting there alone. Thought I'd check in." Eleanor's smile faltered, but she nodded. "That's kind of you," she said softly, though her eyes drifted back to the window, searching for her son. Lila exchanged a glance with Henry. Jamie's arrival was unexpected, a twist that shifted the night's rhythm. He pulled up a chair, his energy nervous but earnest. "I help folks who get stuck at the station," he explained. "Happens more than you'd think. People get left, or they miss connections, and suddenly they've got nowhere to go." Eleanor's hands tightened around her cup. "I'm not homeless," she said, her voice firm despite its fragility. "My son's coming." Jamie nodded quickly. "Of course, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." The conversation turned quieter, more cautious. Lila watched Eleanor closely, noting the way her shoulders slumped each time the door opened and it wasn't Robert. Henry, sensing the shift, shared another story, this one about a stray dog he'd found at the station and adopted. Named him Chief, he said with a grin. Best partner I ever had. Eleanor managed a small laugh, but her eyes were distant. Lila reached over, touching her hand. He'll come, she said, though doubt nodded her. As the night wore on, Jamie offered to check the station one more time. He returned with news. No sign of Robert, but the last train from Cleveland had arrived an hour ago. Lila's stomach dropped. She stepped outside again, dialing Robert's number. This time, he didn't answer. She left another voicemail, her voice sharper now. Robert, it's Lila. Your mother's still waiting. This isn't okay. Back inside, she found Eleanor showing Henry the photo of Thomas. He always said I was stronger than I knew, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't feel strong now. Henry leaned forward, his eyes warm. You're here, aren't you? Sitting tall, waiting. That's strength, Eleanor. Lila's heart ached. She wanted to believe Robert would show up, but the pieces weren't adding up. Why had he left his 85-year-old mother at a station with no phone, no plan? She thought of her own grandmother, how she'd once confessed to feeling invisible in her final years. Lila vowed then and there that Eleanor wouldn't feel that way tonight. Jamie, meanwhile, had an idea. There's a shelter nearby, he said hesitantly. It's not much, but it's warm, and they've got beds. Just for tonight, until we figure things out. Eleanor's face stiffened. I'm not a charity case, she said, her voice sharp with pride. I have a home. My son will come. Lila squeezed her hand. No one's saying you're a charity case, Eleanor. We just want you safe. The tension hung heavy, broken only when Henry spoke up. How about this? My place isn't far. Got a spare room, clean sheets. You can stay there tonight, Eleanor. No strings. Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. I couldn't impose, she said, but her voice wavered. It's no imposition, Henry said firmly. I'd sleep better knowing you're not out here in the cold. Lila watched the exchange, her respect for Henry growing. He was a stranger, yet he offered his home without hesitation. She glanced at Jamie, who nodded encouragingly. I can drive you both, he offered. My van's outside. Eleanor hesitated, her pride battling her exhaustion. Finally, she nodded. All right, she said softly. Just for tonight. They gathered their things, Lila carrying Eleanor's suitcase, Jamie holding the door. The night air was sharp as they crossed to Jamie's van, a beat-up old thing with blankets stacked in the back. Eleanor climbed in slowly, her movements careful but deliberate. Lila sat beside her, Henry in the front with Jamie. As they drove through Chicago's glowing streets, Eleanor stared out the window, her thoughts a tangle of fear and memory. She thought of Thomas, how he'd always known what to do. She thought of Robert, the boy who'd once clung to her hand, now a man she barely recognized. And she thought of these strangers Lila, Henry, Jamie Woad stepped into her night like unexpected lights in a storm. Henry's apartment was small but warm, with photos of his late wife and Chief, the dog, on the walls. He showed Eleanor to the guest room, a simple space with a quilted bedspread and a window overlooking the city. You rest, he said. We'll figure out tomorrow when it comes. Lila stayed a while longer, helping Eleanor settle in. She left her number on a piece of paper, promising to check in. You're not alone, she said again, her voice fierce with conviction. As Lila and Jamie left, Eleanor sat on the bed, clutching Thomas's photo. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to cry not out of despair, but from the unexpected kindness that had carried her through. Morning light filtered through Henry's guest room window, casting soft patterns on the quilt where Eleanor lay. She hadn't slept much, her mind churning with questions about Robert. Why hadn't he come? The thought twisted like a knife, but the warmth of Henry's home and the kindness of Lila and Jamie kept the pain from overwhelming her. She rose slowly, her joints protesting, and found Henry in the kitchen, brewing coffee. Chief, his scruffy terrier, wagged his tail at her feet. Morning, Eleanor, Henry said, his smile gentle. Sleep okay? Better than I expected, she admitted, sitting at the small table. The smell of coffee reminded her of mornings with Thomas, and she felt a pang of longing. But Henry's easy presence grounded her, and when he slid a mug her way, she took it gratefully. Lila arrived soon after, her camera slung around her neck. She'd barely slept, haunted by Eleanor's story. As a photographer, she'd always chased moments of truth, and something about Eleanor's quiet resilience felt like a story worth telling. I thought we could try calling Robert again, she said, setting her satchel down, and maybe figure out a plan. Eleanor nodded, though her heart wasn't in it. She gave Lila the number again, and this time, Robert answered on the second ring. His voice was strained, apologetic. "Ma, I'm so sorry. Work was a mess, and I lost track of time." Lila's eyes narrowed, but she handed the phone to Eleanor. "Robert." Eleanor's voice was soft, hopeful. "Where were you?" "I'm in Chicago now," he said quickly. "I'll come get you." "Where are you?" Eleanor hesitated, glancing at Henry and Lila. She gave them Henry's address, her voice steady but laced with doubt. When she hung up, she looked smaller, as if the call had drained her. Lila exchanged a look with Henry. "I don't trust him," she whispered when Eleanor stepped away to pet Chief. "Something's off." Henry nodded. "I've seen guys like him. All talk, no follow-through. She deserves better." They didn't have long to dwell on it. A knock came at the door, and Lila opened it to find a woman in her 40s, her face lined with worry. "I'm Sarah," she said, her voice urgent. "I'm Robert's wife. Is Eleanor here?" Eleanor froze, her hand on Chief's fur. "Sarah?" she said, stepping forward. "What's going on?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. "Robert told me you were staying with a friend in Chicago. I only found out this morning that he left you at the station. I'm so sorry, Eleanor." The room went still. Lila's heart sank, and Henry's jaw tightened. Eleanor's face crumpled, but she straightened, her pride holding her together. "Why?" she asked simply. Sarah hesitated, then spilled the truth. Robert had been struggling, his job was shaky, their marriage strained. He'd convinced himself that Eleanor was better off on her own, that he couldn't handle the responsibility. "He didn't mean to hurt you," Sarah said, though her voice lacked conviction. He's lost." Eleanor's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "I've lost too, but I didn't leave him." The words hung heavy, a quiet indictment. Sarah looked away, ashamed. Lila stepped forward, her anger simmering. "He left an 85-year-old woman alone at a train station," she said. "That's not just being lost. That's abandoning her." Sarah nodded, tears falling. "I know. I'm here to make it right. Eleanor, come home with me. Please." Eleanor looked at Lila, then Henry, then back at Sarah. "I need time," she said, her voice firm. "I'm not ready to go back yet." Sarah's face fell, but she didn't argue. "I'll wait," she said. "As long as you need." After Sarah left, promising to return later, Lila sat with Eleanor. "What do you want to do?" she asked gently. Eleanor stared at Thomas's photo, which she'd set on the table. "I want to feel like I belong somewhere," she said. "Not like a burden." Henry, who'd been quiet, spoke up. "You belong right here for now," he said. "And if you want, I can take you to the community center today. Got a gardening group that'd love to meet you." Eleanor's eyes brightened slightly. Gardening had always been her refuge. "I'd like that," she said. They spent the day at the community center, where Eleanor met a group of retirees who welcomed her warmly. She shared tips on pruning roses, her hands moving with a confidence she hadn't felt in months. Lila snapped photos, capturing Eleanor's faint smile as she worked. Henry stayed close, joking with the group, his presence a steady anchor. That evening, Lila showed Eleanor the photos on her camera. "You look happy here," she said. "Like you're home." Eleanor's lips trembled. "I haven't felt that in a long time," she admitted. "Thank you, Lila." And Henry. As night fell, Lila posted one of the photos online, a shot of Eleanor laughing with the gardening group, her face lit with quiet joy. She captioned it, "At 85, she was left at a station. Today, she found a new beginning." The post spread quickly, shared by strangers moved by Eleanor's story and the kindness of those who'd helped her. Eleanor woke to the sound of Chief's soft snoring at the foot of her bed. Henry's guest room, with its faded quilt and morning light, felt more like home than her Cleveland apartment ever had. She rose, her movements slow but purposeful, and joined Henry for breakfast. The smell of pancakes filled the air, and for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Lila arrived mid-morning, her phone buzzing with notifications. Her post about Eleanor had gone viral, shared thousands of times across social media. Comments poured in, people offering support, others sharing their own stories of abandonment or unexpected kindness. Lila read a few aloud, and Eleanor's eyes widened. "All this for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. You're not just a story, Lila said, squeezing her hand. You're inspiring people. Henry grinned. Told you you're stronger than you know. But the attention brought complications. Reporters began calling, wanting interviews. A local news crew showed up at Henry's apartment, asking to speak with the abandoned widow. Eleanor shrank back, overwhelmed. I don't want to be a spectacle, she said, her voice firm. I just want to live. Lila nodded, stepping in to handle the press. She gave a brief statement, emphasizing Eleanor's resilience and the kindness of strangers, but kept her name and location private. She deserves peace, Lila told the reporters, her tone leaving no room for argument. Meanwhile, Sarah called again, her voice heavy with guilt. Robert's here, she said. He wants to see you, Eleanor. He's sorry. Eleanor's heart twisted. She wanted to believe him, but the sting of his abandonment lingered. Tell him to come tomorrow, she said. I need one more day. That day, Eleanor returned to the community center, where the gardening group had prepared a small plot for her. They'd heard her story through Lila's post and wanted to honor her. This is your space, said Maria, a spry 70-year-old who led the group. Plant whatever you like. Eleanor knelt in the dirt, her hands working with a familiar ease. She planted rose cuttings, her fingers gentle but sure. Lila captured the moment, her camera clicking softly. Henry helped with the heavier work, his laughter mingling with the group's chatter. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt part of something bigger than herself. That evening, a surprise arrived. Jamie, the outreach volunteer, brought a stack of letters from people who'd seen Lila's post. Some offered donations, others shared words of encouragement. One letter, from a woman named Clara, stood out. She was 80, a widow herself, and wrote of being left by her children years ago. Your story gives me hope, she wrote. Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone. Eleanor read the letter twice, tears in her eyes. I didn't think I could matter to anyone, she said softly. Not like this. Lila smiled. You matter more than you know. The next morning, Robert arrived at Henry's apartment. He looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. Ma, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. I couldn't handle everything. Eleanor studied him, seeing the boy he'd once been. You left me, Robert, she said, her voice steady but kind. But I'm still here, and I'm stronger than you think. Robert nodded, tears falling. I want to make this right, he said. Come home with us. Please. Eleanor glanced at Lila and Henry, who stood quietly nearby. She thought of the gardening group, the letters, the new roots she'd begun to plant. I'll come, she said finally. But things have to change. I'm not invisible. Robert agreed, promising to do better. Sarah, who'd come with him, hugged Eleanor tightly. We'll make it work, she whispered. As Eleanor packed her suitcase, Lila gave her a small photo album pictures from the past few days of Eleanor gardening, laughing with Henry, petting Chief. So you remember, Lila said. You're never alone. Eleanor hugged her, then Henry, her heart full. You've given me more than you know, she said. The story of Eleanor Grayson spread far beyond Chicago, a testament to resilience and the power of strangers' kindness. Lila's photos became a symbol of hope, shared in newspapers and online, inspiring others to reach out to those who felt forgotten. And Eleanor, at 85, found a new chapter not just as a widow, but as a woman who'd reclaimed her strength.